Hi, my name is Elyra Vance. I'm 32, and today I stood in court while my own sister called me a threat to the family because I came back to claim the house our grandfather left me. It should have been a simple homecoming. Instead, it turned into a courtroom battle where every lie they ever told about me came crashing down. They said I was unstable, dangerous, that I didn't belong. But the truth, they were afraid I remembered too much. Before I tell you how I made the judge lock the doors and why the police raided the courtroom that day, hit that subscribe button. A tiny click, sure, but for me, it's a lifeline. Proof that someone out there believes the truth should be heard, even when your family wants it buried. I hadn't seen the Vance estate in 10 years, but the iron gates looked exactly the same, rust blooming at the edges like old blood. I stepped off the Greyhound in Harrisburg with nothing but a canvas backpack, army fatigues wrinkled from the ride, and the weight of my discharge papers pressing into my spine. July heat stuck to my skin. Pennsylvania never did know how to welcome its own. My boots hit the gravel with a dull crunch. Each step toward the gate felt heavier than the last. There it was, the house I used to chase fireflies around, with its gabled roof and ivy-covered walls, the window panes still stained with childhood arguments and birthday laughter. I pressed the buzzer, expecting silence. Instead, Zara's voice came through the intercom, flat and metallic. "You're not welcome here, Elyra. The house is mine now." Her voice was ice, cold, practiced, not even a flicker of hesitation. I blinked. "Zara?" My mouth was dry. "What are you talking about?" The only response was the sharp buzz of the gate locking shut. I stood there, one hand still on the rusted bar. For a full beat, I didn't breathe. Then I saw it. A "For Sale" sign twisted in the breeze, planted just behind the hedges. Below it, in bold letters, was her name. Just hers. No Vance sisters. No me. Something twisted in my chest, slow and sour. My name was gone. I stepped back, scanning the upper windows. One curtain shifted. A silhouette, tall, still, stood just behind the glass, watching. 1,000 missions couldn't prepare you for being erased by your own family. I turned slowly, fingers trembling as they brushed the crinkled edge of my papers. My discharge was supposed to mean closure, a new beginning. But this? This was war in a different uniform. The air smelled like grass and distant thunderstorms. I swallowed hard, jaw clenched. I had one voicemail from Mom, garbled, tearful, saying she was caught in the middle, whatever that meant. She hadn't returned any of my calls since. I backed away from the gate like it might bite me, slid into the driver's seat of my borrowed Corolla, hands gripping the steering wheel too tight. Her voice kept echoing in my head. "The house is mine now!" I wanted to scream, but soldiers don't scream. We assess, we adapt. Still, it wasn't strategy that pulled my gaze back toward the house. It was something primal, the same thing that made me return in the first place. This wasn't just about a house. It was about everything Zara had taken from me, or was trying to. What the hell happened while I was gone? The trees lining the drive seemed taller now, like they'd grown over my absence and decided they didn't recognize me anymore. I reached for the glove box and pulled out the faded photo I kept tucked beside the registration. 3 girls, me, Zara, and Mom, arms looped together in front of the porch swing. I must have been 13. Zara was already 17, already perfect, already angry. Looking at her eyes now, frozen mid-smile, I noticed something I hadn't before, something sharp, something that didn't match the curve of her mouth. Had that always been there? I stared at my own face in the photo, younger, lighter, before the sandstorms and sirens and sleepless nights, before I was taught to measure trust in silence, not words. I turned the photo over. Grandpa's handwriting was still there. "My girls, protect each other." Dated July 2005. I closed my eyes. Grandpa. He would have never let this happen. He promised the house would be mine. Not in front of Zara. He was always careful. But one night, just us, as he held my hand under the stars, he said it. "This place is yours when I'm gone, Elyra. You earned it." But now, that promise felt like a cruel joke, a ghost with no voice in court. I looked up at the house again just as the silhouette at the window disappeared. My pulse quickened. Zara didn't just shut me out, she erased me, no calls, no warnings. Just a locked gate and a stranger's voice, and now a real estate sign. I started the car. The engine stuttered, then caught. I didn't know where I was going yet, just away. But as the tires kicked up gravel and the estate shrank in my rearview mirror, one thought looped louder than the rest. Why? Why would my sister want me gone? What was she hiding? I tightened my grip on the wheel, knuckles white. Whatever this was, it wasn't over. It was just beginning. The interstate was empty that night, the road ahead glowing in streaks of orange and shadow as I headed west toward Pittsburgh. Rain had started to fall, light at first, then heavier, soaking the windshield in waves. The wipers squeaked in protest, slow and tired, like me. I should have turned the radio on, white noise, distraction, but the silence felt honest. Let me feel what I didn't want to name. Somewhere around mile marker 82, the ache in my chest pulled me backward. Not physically, emotionally, like being lassoed by memory. I saw it all again. It was 10 years ago, winter. Grandpa's study smelled like tobacco and old books, and the fireplace crackled like it was whispering secrets. I was home on leave. My boots were still wet from shoveling snow, melting puddles onto the Persian rug. Grandpa sat in his leather chair, wrapped in that same green plaid blanket he always used. His skin had already begun to look like paper, but his voice was steady. He took my hand, rough, cold, and pressed a folded envelope into it. "This house," he whispered, "is yours when I'm gone." I remember staring at him, confused. "But Zara," he didn't let me finish. "She has enough, and she never loved this place like you do." The flames danced across the walls. My throat tightened. He died 2 months later. I kept that moment tucked inside me like a compass. Through deployments, through every sleepless night in foreign barracks, it reminded me who I was, where I belonged. Now, that compass felt broken. I blinked, and the highway returned. The dashboard clock said 2:12 a.m. I was nearing Pittsburgh. My fingers flexed on the steering wheel, aching from the grip. I needed to stop, but not yet. Zara's voice replayed like a curse. "The house is mine now." I'd seen battlefield betrayals. Friends turned enemies. Commanders turned cowards. But your own blood? It cut deeper. By the time I reached the apartment, bare, half-packed from before deployment, the sun was a faint promise behind gray clouds. I locked the door behind me and stood in the middle of the living room, disoriented. Dust motes floated through a narrow beam of morning light, like fragments of things I used to believe in. I dropped my pack with a thud, then sat, cross-legged on the floor. My fingers traced the lines of the faded photo again, that birthday on the porch swing. Mom's smile was tired but real. Zara's eyes, though, now I couldn't unsee it. That flicker of resentment, or was it boredom? I pulled the envelope Grandpa gave me out of the hidden pocket in my duffel. The seal was broken long ago, but I'd kept it with me like a relic. Inside was the handwritten note he'd read to me that night, his words of love and pride, but no legal deed, no official proof. He must have trusted the will would speak for itself. He didn't know what Zara was capable of. The bitterness crawled up my throat. I wanted to punch something, scream. Instead, I leaned back against the wall and let my eyes close. The soft tick of the kitchen clock filled the room, too loud. I thought of calling Mom, again, but what would I even say? "Hi, your eldest daughter sold my name out of the family?" No. She'd probably just say I misunderstood, that I didn't see the full picture. I'd seen enough. By afternoon, I was pacing. I couldn't sit still. I needed to move, to dig. I knew where the county records office was, downtown Harrisburg, but going back there meant facing Zara. Again. Still, if Grandpa's will had been changed or buried, there had to be a record. I grabbed my phone but stopped short of dialing. I needed to think like Intel again. Not sister, not daughter, survivor. I opened my laptop instead and searched property transfers on the estate. Sure enough, 3 months ago, the deed was reassigned to Elyra Vance. No mention of my name. My pulse thundered in my ears. 3 months ago, I was still overseas, still getting mortared in a tent near Jalalabad. No way I signed anything. I pulled up my files. There was no alert, no notice. Nothing had come through channels, just silence. Legal silence, too perfect. A knock startled me. Not a hard one, just 3 soft raps. I crept to the door and looked through the peephole. Nothing. Still, something chilled me. I pressed my back to the door, heart thudding. They knew I was looking. Already. I returned to the floor, restless. Every hour of service taught me one thing. If they're trying to scare you, you're getting close. I picked up Grandpa's note again, ran my thumb over his signature. The way he looped the V like a flourish. That's when it hit me. Zara had filed a deed. Where was the will? Why hadn't I seen it? Had it been replaced? Destroyed? The room suddenly felt too small. I needed help, but not from anyone Zara could reach. My gut screamed that this wasn't just sibling greed. She wasn't just trying to keep the house, she was trying to erase me. A slow unease crawled across my skin. Why? What was buried in that house that she couldn't let me near? My breath caught. The upstairs window. The figure. That wasn't Zara, that shape. It was too tall, too still. A tremor went through me. Not fear, clarity. Someone else was inside, someone watching me, not just from the past, but from right now. And suddenly, Grandpa's whisper returned with new weight. This place is yours when I'm gone. But maybe he wasn't the only one who'd made a promise that night, and maybe not all promises were meant to be kept. The cafe smelled like scorched espresso and old vinyl booths, the kind of place that hadn't changed since the 80s, and didn't care to. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, washing everything in a cold yellow haze. I sat in the far corner, back to the wall, my fingertips tracing the chipped edge of a sugar dispenser while I waited. My leg bounced restlessly under the table. Lila Hart slid into the booth across from me. Her hair was pulled into a tight bun, glasses perched low on her nose. Civilian now, but we'd served together. She knew how to keep things quiet. "You look like hell," she muttered, not unkindly. I offered a hollow smirk. "Good to see you, too." She slid a manila folder across the formica. Her fingers lingered on it just long enough to warn me, this isn't small. I opened it, and everything in me went still. At the top of the page, deed transfer of property, Vance estate. Below that, my name, my signature. Except it wasn't mine, not even close. "I didn't sign this," I said, voice low, tight. "I was in Afghanistan 3 months ago." Lila nodded, solemn. "I cross-referenced it with your discharge timeline. There's no way this is legal. Whoever did this used a proxy signature. I've seen it before. Messy work pretending to be clean." I stared at the looping forgery. My name had been reduced to a scribble, a weapon used against me. My hand curled into a fist on the table. I pressed my knuckles into the formica until they ached. "She faked the transfer," I whispered. "She arranged the transfer," Lila corrected. "You think Zara forged it herself? Come on. She has people, probably paid someone to bury the paper trail." The thought landed like gravel in my stomach. Lila lowered her voice. "There's more." From the folder, she pulled a smaller envelope, aged, sealed in wax. My breath caught. "I found this tucked in the back," she said. "It was in the public file drawer, but unlabeled. Looks like it was never opened." I reached for it with both hands, careful. The seal was familiar. Grandpa's family crest. A lion and compass. Why had this been left behind? My palms were sweating. The envelope was warm from her touch, now trembling in mine. "I haven't opened it," Lila said. "Thought you should." I nodded but didn't move. Instead, I looked at the window behind her. Rain streaked the glass in diagonal lines, the sky darkening again. The world always felt heavier when something true was about to be revealed. What if this letter changed everything? What if it didn't? I slipped the envelope into my coat pocket. "I'll read it when I'm ready," I said. Lila looked at me for a long moment, then sat back. "You've got a fight ahead." I gave a small, bitter laugh. "What's new?" We left the cafe 20 minutes later. I kept looking over my shoulder, feeling watched. Not paranoia, instinct. Back at my apartment, I shut the blinds, double-locked the door, and sat on the floor. For a while, I just sat there, knees drawn up, letter still burning a hole in my coat pocket. I couldn't open it yet. Couldn't even bring myself to touch it again. Instead, I pulled out my service file, laying it beside the forged deed. My hands moved with practiced calm, but inside, I was unraveling. I wanted to scream at the walls, not just for the betrayal, but for how quiet and clever it all was. Zara hadn't just stolen my home, she'd weaponized my absence. That's what stung the most. She waited until she knew I couldn't fight back. The only thing worse than being erased is being erased while you're still alive to feel it. I stared at the two documents side by side, one that proved who I was and one that tried to rewrite it. Then I saw it. A subtle detail on the forged deed, an incorrect middle initial. Instead of Elyra C. Vance, it read Elyra G. Vance. A mistake, a crack. I snapped a photo, emailed it to Lila, then texted, "Got it. It's sloppy." She replied within seconds, "Good, that's our leverage. But we'll need more." More. I looked again at the unopened letter. My fingers finally moved toward it but stopped when my phone buzzed. A blocked number. I hesitated, then answered. A pause. Then a voice. Familiar, venomous. "You don't know what you're doing, Elyra." Zara. I didn't speak. "You think a piece of paper changes anything?" she hissed. "Walk away, or what I have on you will go public." My jaw clenched. "What exactly do you think you have?" Her laugh was low, smooth. "Your service record, your medical notes? You think a judge won't look twice at a soldier with PTSD and a disciplinary flag?" My pulse thudded in my ears. "I'll destroy you," she said. "Legally, publicly, completely." Click. Silence. The line went dead. I sat frozen, the phone still pressed to my cheek, her words crawling under my skin like fire ants. PTSD. She was going to spin my trauma into a weapon. That was the moment the shame tried to return. The old guilt, the fear. But something inside me snapped instead. She thought I was weak. She thought I'd fold. But I wasn't 19 anymore, and this wasn't her game to win. I stood up slowly, walked to the kitchen sink, and turned on the tap. Cold water rushed over my wrists. It grounded me, cleared my head. Then I pulled out the letter, slid my thumb under the wax, cracked the seal, but I didn't open it, not yet. Because at that moment, something shifted outside. A shadow passed across the blinds, fast, deliberate. I froze. Someone was watching. Again. I stepped back from the window, heart racing. And for the first time since coming home, I realized this wasn't just about me and Zara. Someone else was involved, and whatever was in that letter, it was the reason they were watching. The moment I cracked the seal on Grandpa's letter, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I stared at the screen, throat tight. Another anonymous warning? Another trap? I let it ring once, twice. Then I answered. Before I could say a word, a voice slid through the speaker like oil across glass. "Back off, Elyra, or your military record goes public." The click was instant. But the voice? Zara. I stood frozen in the middle of my apartment, the letter trembling in my hands. It wasn't just a threat, it was precision fire. She knew exactly where to hit me. My record wasn't spotless. Most aren't, after 10 years in military intelligence. But the little smudges, mental health flags, a botched field decision in Kandahar, they were enough to paint me unstable if twisted the right way. If spun hard enough in court, I'd lose everything. I dropped the envelope onto the table like it had burned me. My fingers wouldn't stop shaking. This wasn't just about the estate anymore. It was about silencing me, discrediting me before I ever set foot in court. She was trying to erase the only version of me that still had a voice. And it was working. I stumbled to the kitchen sink, turned on the faucet, and splashed cold water across my face. I gripped the edges of the counter until my knuckles turned white. "You're not that scared kid anymore," I told myself. "You survived IEDs, interrogations, being hunted at night. You can survive this." But it didn't feel the same. Out there, at least I could see the enemy. Here, it wore my sister's voice. By the time I calmed down, the sun had vanished behind a curtain of clouds. My apartment felt too still, like the silence was waiting for something. I walked to the table, eyes falling on Grandpa's envelope again. I picked it up, this time gently, and opened it. Inside, a single sheet. His handwriting was as steady as ever. Sharp loops, no hesitation. "Elyra, if you're reading this, something has gone wrong. The estate should be yours. I've written a separate will and kept a copy with Judge Holt. Trust her. Be careful who you trust in the family. Things are not as they seem. Love always. Grandpa, a separate will. Judge Holt." It was like the ground shifted beneath my feet. Why hadn't this come out when he died? I folded the letter and tucked it safely into the folder. Then I turned toward the window, just in time to catch a flash of motion outside. A man. Dark coat, hood up, standing across the street, not moving, watching. By the time I reached the window, he was gone. My skin prickled. My instincts roared back to life, louder than ever. This wasn't coincidence. I snapped a photo of the letter and texted it to Lila with a simple message. Holt has the will. Zara knows. She's escalating. Lila replied a minute later. Stay put. I'll pull her clerk's calendar. And Elyra, don't open the door for anyone. I paced the apartment, checking locks twice. My adrenaline wouldn't settle. I'd dealt with surveillance before. Civilians thought it was about high-tech gadgets, but it wasn't. It was about pressure. Let them know they're being watched, make them jump at shadows. And now, it was working. Even my own breath felt too loud. Then my phone buzzed again. This time, a text. From Mom. Don't do this, please. She's forcing me to stay silent. My heart thudded like a dropped stone. I read it again. She's forcing me. The message was a scream wrapped in whispers, a plea buried under control. I typed back instantly. What do you mean? How is she forcing you? No answer. Minutes crawled by. My head was a riot of questions. Had Zara threatened her too? Blackmail? Isolation? Was Mom just afraid? Or was she trapped? My thoughts spun toward memories I hadn't touched in years. Zara holding Mom's wrist too tight after an argument. The quiet bruises we never talked about. The phone calls I got in boot camp where Mom's voice trembled but never said why. And suddenly I saw it. This wasn't new. It had just taken me years to see the pattern for what it was. Zara didn't bully. She controlled. Quietly. Calculated. And she did it with enough polish to keep the world believing she was the victim. That realization hit harder than the forged deed. My sister hadn't just turned on me. She'd been poisoning the ground we stood on for years. I picked up the photo of us on the porch swing again. Zara's smile, Mom's eyes, tight around the corners even then, and me, oblivious. How long had I missed the signs? My phone buzzed one last time. Another blocked number. I let it ring. Voicemail. Then, silence. I didn't press play. Not yet. Instead, I walked into the hallway, grabbed my jacket, and slipped my Glock into the inside pocket. Not because I planned to use it, because I finally understood what kind of war this was, and who I was really fighting. I stepped out into the night, cold air tightening around me. The street was empty, but I knew better. Someone was out there, watching, waiting. Maybe it wasn't just Zara, maybe this thing was bigger, and if it was, I had just become the one variable they hadn't accounted for. The bar was dim, barely lit by a row of neon signs that buzzed like flies in the heat. The air smelled like spilled beer, old leather, and something sour underneath, something like memory. I hadn't been here in years, but the corners still remembered me. He was already seated at the end of the bar, shoulders hunched over a glass of something neat. Same buzz cut. Same don't mess with me posture. Torrin Hale, the only person I trusted to show up without questions. I walked toward him. My boots were loud on the warped wooden floor. He didn't look up. Heard you were back? I slid onto the stool beside him. Guess that makes two of us. He glanced at me. One eye still bloodshot from an old injury, the other clear and sharp. You look like hell, he said. You sound like a broken record. He cracked a smile, faint and familiar. So, what'd she take? My name, my home, my history. He nodded once, slow. Then he pulled something from his coat and slid it across the bar. A wrinkled photo, black and white, grainy. A tall figure near the estate. Gloved hands, face shadowed. No plates on the van they came in, Torrin muttered. Parked by the edge of the woods. Midnight last week. I studied the photo. The man stood by the back entrance. Not a delivery, not a guest. Surveillance. My skin prickled. He see you? Doubt it. I was in the ridge. Of course he was. Torrin didn't get spotted unless he wanted to. I traced the blurry outline in the photo, a strange unease curling through my gut. Whoever that was, he wasn't family. He wasn't casual. He was working. But for who? I've got eyes on the place now, Torrin added, but if you're going in, you're not going alone. I didn't ask you to babysit. He looked at me hard. I'm not babysitting. I'm returning a favor. That stopped me. We didn't talk about Kandahar, about the time I pulled him out of a collapsed safe house with one arm and 3 broken ribs. I swallowed and nodded once. Fair. The bartender passed by, wiping down the counter. I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the mirror behind the bottles. Pale, tired, but clearer somehow. What's your end game? Torrin asked. I paused. Expose the forgery, prove the will's real, and make sure Zara never does this to anyone again. He gave a low whistle. That's not a plan. That's a war. I've fought worse. He tapped the photo. Not on your own. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A message from Lila. Judge Holt's out of town for 2 days. We'll have to wait to get the will. Be careful. I exhaled slowly. So much of this depended on timing, on not giving Zara a window to cover her tracks. Torrin finished his drink and stood. Come on. You're staying at my place tonight. Too many eyes on yours. I'm not hiding. Not hiding. Regrouping. There's a difference. Outside, the air was thick with humidity and tension. We walked toward his truck in silence, gravel crunching beneath our feet. Halfway there, he stopped. Elyra. I turned. He held something out, a burner phone. Use this from now on. I took it. You think she's tracking mine? I'd bet your VA file on it. A sliver of cold crept down my spine. We drove in silence most of the way, the headlights cutting through mist like blades. My thoughts kept circling that photo, the gloves, the stance, the way the figure stood with too much discipline to be some drifter. Who was he, and what was he looking for? Torrin's apartment sat above a repair garage on the outskirts of town. Spartan, clean, weapons cabinet by the wall, gear packs lined up like soldiers. He handed me a pillow and a blanket without a word. As I settled onto the couch, I noticed something on the coffee table, a file folder, my name on the tab. I opened it. Surveillance photos, maps of the estate, a list of local security firms. He'd been watching before I even called. I looked up at him. Why? Torrin leaned against the doorframe. Because I knew one day you'd come back. And you'd need someone who wasn't afraid of the mess. The room went quiet. I should have said thank you or something. But the words stuck. Instead, I nodded. Just once. Later that night, long after the garage lights shut off and Torrin retreated to his room, I sat alone in the dark. The only light came from the street lamp outside, faint and yellow, like it was running out of faith. I took out the photo again, studied the gloves, the way the man held himself, military, maybe ex, maybe current, definitely trained, and not just watching, waiting. I traced the outline with my thumb, then flipped the photo over. Torrin had scribbled something in tiny print. He came back the next night. My pulse slowed, then surged. This wasn't a one-off. This was a pattern. And if he kept returning, it meant there was something inside the house worth guarding, or stealing. I set the photo down and stared at the ceiling, the gears in my head turning faster than ever. Grandpa's will, the real deed. Whatever the hell Zara was hiding, it was all tied to that estate, and now someone else wanted it too. Torrin and I drove with the windows down, the summer air thick with the scent of honeysuckle and diesel. It was just past midnight, the kind of hour where silence carried weight. My palms rested on the recorder in my lap, slick with sweat. The plan was simple. Get in, plant the device, get out. But simple plans have a habit of turning into chaos. The Vance estate sat in the valley like a relic from a storybook, shrouded in fog and shadow. Moonlight filtered through the tree branches, cutting soft lines across the gravel drive. My childhood home, my battlefield now. We parked at the edge of the woods, far enough from the cameras I knew Zara would have installed. Torrin killed the engine, and we sat in silence for a beat. "You sure about this?" he asked, voice low. "No," I said, opening the door. I slid out, boots crunching soft earth. The air smelled like rain about to fall, wet and electric. Every step toward the house felt heavier than the last, like the ground wanted me to turn around. Torrin moved ahead, silent as a shadow, scanning the perimeter with practiced eyes. He pointed to a narrow path along the stone foundation that led toward the basement. "Vents here," he whispered, "leads straight under the parlor." I knelt beside it, fingers brushing the metal grate, cool, undisturbed. I pulled the recorder from my coat and secured it just inside, where sound would funnel straight from the room above. My breath hitched as I backed away. Now we waited. We retreated to the tree line, concealed in thick brush. I pulled my hoodie low, heart pounding harder than it had in combat. Not fear, anticipation. Minutes passed, then more. I started to wonder if we'd wasted a night, until Zara's voice pierced the stillness. "She's getting too close. We moved the crates tonight." The recorder caught it all. Torin stiffened beside me. "Crates?" My blood ran cold. Zara's voice again, sharper now. "If Elyra gets near the house again, eliminate her." The word hung there like smoke. Eliminate. Not scare, not silence, erase. I gripped a root to steady myself. The earth under my boots didn't feel stable anymore. Then a second voice joined in, deeper, unfamiliar, calm in a way that felt trained. "She has military codes embedded in her background. We can use them for the next deal." I turned sharply to Torin. His jaw clenched. Codes? What the hell was this? Torin leaned in, whispering, "They're selling access." My mind couldn't keep up. Access to what? He didn't answer. I watched the house. Dim light flickered from the parlor window. Shadows moved. The voices faded. But what they'd left behind was louder than anything. Zara was involved in something way beyond family fraud, and she wasn't working alone. I sat back against the tree, chest tight. This wasn't just personal anymore. This was criminal, federal, and I just walked into the middle of it with a half-charged recorder and a combat knife in my boot. We stayed until the lights cut off. Then we slipped back into the woods. Neither of us spoke until we were halfway back to the truck. "I knew she was ruthless," I said, voice barely above a whisper. "But this?" Torin rubbed his temples. "She's selling defense intel, probably laundering through property deals." The pieces slammed together in my brain. Zara's sudden real estate empire, the forgery, the surveillance, the fear in Mom's voice. Zara hadn't just erased me. She'd built a business on it. Back at Torin's place, I plugged the recorder into his laptop and played it again. Hearing her say eliminate made something in me break. Not emotionally, strategically. This wasn't about my inheritance anymore. This was about who she could hurt next. Torin stood over my shoulder, arms crossed. "We take this to the feds." "No," I said too fast. "Not yet." He narrowed his eyes. "Why?" "Because the moment we do, she'll know we're listening. She'll burn the evidence. Run!" I stared at the waveform on the screen. The sharp spikes where her voice hit like daggers. "We need more," I added. "Proof of the crates, the code usage, the paper trail." "And how do you plan to get that?" I hesitated. "I go back in." Torin shook his head. "No way." "She already wants me dead, Torin. I'm not safer sitting here. I might as well be useful." His jaw tightened. "You go back in, you go in with backup." I didn't argue. I didn't need to, but I knew in my gut I'd go either way. I walked to the window. The street was empty, still as glass. But I didn't feel alone. I could still hear that second voice. Low, precise. He wasn't protecting Zara. He was using her, which meant my sister, despite everything, might not even be the worst piece on the board. That thought settled in like a stone. Whatever was in those crates, whatever codes they were using, it started with me, and I had no idea how deep it went. Torin's apartment smelled like soda and motor oil, sharp, metallic, and oddly comforting. Morning light seeped through the blinds, slashing across a folding table we'd dragged into the middle of the room. Maps, printouts, and empty coffee cups cluttered the surface. My laptop buzzed faintly under a web of USB cords. It looked like a war room. It was a war room. I stood over the map of the Vance estate, red ink circling the basement, the east wing, and the garage. 3 potential stash zones, crates, codes, evidence. Whatever Zara was moving through the house, it had to be hidden in plain sight. Torin paced beside the table, fingers tapping a yellow notepad. He was a man of few words and even fewer distractions, but his jaw stayed clenched, his eyes never resting. We both knew the clock was ticking. The recorder had caught Zara's voice clearly. The mystery man's deeper tones still echoed in my head. Use her codes for the next deal. What did that even mean? Had they cloned my military credentials? Did they think I'd rolled over and died? I sat down, rubbed my temples. Across from me, Lila sipped black coffee out of a chipped mug. She'd arrived an hour ago, still in her notary blazer and running shoes, half civilian, half covert operator. She held up the letter Grandpa had written, now scanned and digitized. "There's a watermark," she said, "a real estate trust seal from 2008. I matched it against his known assets." I leaned forward. She pointed to the scanned image. "This stamp is from a private security box registered in Judge Holt's name, joint access only. My guess? That's where the original will is." Torrin raised an eyebrow. "You trust Holt?" "She's tough," I said. "And she loved Grandpa. She officiated his funeral, remember?" He gave a half grunt, unconvinced. Lila continued, "I also checked the county recorder's metadata. There was a second will filed, digitally logged, then redacted 2 days later." "Let me guess," I muttered. "Zara had it pulled. Or someone with clearance did." The room went quiet. The weight of that thought landed hard. Zara had help, someone on the inside. "Pull every contact she's had in the last year," I said. "Anyone who's worked the estate files, courthouse staff, deed processors, get names." "I'm already on it," Lila said, typing as she spoke. "But it won't matter unless we move fast. If that second voice gets wind we're this close, he'll bury it all." Torrin spread 3 photos across the table, still shots from the surveillance. The gloved man again, always positioned near entry points, always at night. "He's military," Torrin said. "Maybe private, contracted, but he moves like someone used to command." "And Zara's just the face," I said. "She's laundering something, money, data, maybe both." I clenched my fists on the table. The truth was right there, just beyond our reach. One slip, one missed lead, and it'd vanish again. I looked up at them. "We have 3 objectives. 1, get Holt back in town and access the box. 2, trace Zara's shell companies. And 3, figure out what's in those crates." Lila added, 4, stay alive." She wasn't wrong. The tension in the room thickened as we worked. Paper rustled, coffee sloshed. Somewhere in the garage below, a machine hissed to life, then sputtered out. The world outside kept turning, blissfully unaware of what was unraveling behind this door. Mid-afternoon brought a sharp knock. I froze. Torrin moved to the peephole, gun low but ready. He opened the door a crack. Just a delivery man, young in a blue cap, chewing gum. "Got a drop-off for Elyra Vance?" My blood ran cold. No one should have had this address. I stepped forward. "That's me." He handed me a blank envelope. No label, no postage. Then he walked off, too fast. I closed the door behind him, locked it, bolted it. The envelope was light, thin. I opened it slowly, breath shallow. Inside was a single photo. Me, sleeping at Torrin's apartment. Taken from outside the window. A flash of nausea hit my gut. "How long has that window been uncovered?" I asked. Torrin answered before I finished. "Last night, briefly." "They're watching," I said. "They're that close." Torrin swore under his breath. Lila stood perfectly still, her mouth pressed into a line. I stared at the photo again. My body was curled on the couch, vulnerable, exposed, and someone had been outside, watching without a sound. It wasn't just surveillance, it was a warning. I looked up, heart thudding. "They want me to know they're ahead of us." "Are they?" Lila asked quietly. I shook my head. "Not for long." We moved fast after that. Covered the windows, swapped laptops, rewired the camera feeds. Torrin activated his backup router. Paranoia became protocol. Still, the feeling didn't leave me. That photo had been taken while I was dreaming about home, back when it was safe, back before Zara turned it into a battlefield. I sat again at the table, staring at the map of the estate. "We hit it tonight," I said. "We go back in." Torrin didn't flinch. "What's the target?" "The garage, the crates. I need to see what she's hiding." "And if they're armed?" I met his eyes. "Then we stop pretending this is just about a will." I picked up the photo one last time, ran my fingers over the edges, then folded it neatly into my jacket. The war room was quiet again, too quiet. Outside, the sky darkened into storm gray. It was time. The Harrisburg courthouse looked smaller than I remembered. Pale brick, white columns, and glass doors that hadn't been replaced since the Bush era, but it wasn't the building that made my stomach twist. It was the silence inside, that kind of government hush that feels like judgment before anyone speaks. My boots echoed against the marble as I stepped through security. The bailiff glanced at my military ID, then at the uniform I hadn't worn in months. "Courtroom B," he muttered, handing me back the badge. I nodded, but my throat stayed tight. Courtroom B smelled like dust, wood polish, and stale tension. People always assumed the drama came from what was said, but really, it was the moments right before, the stillness, the eyes. Zara was already there, seated at the plaintiff's table in a cream blazer, legs crossed, smirk polished to perfection. Her lawyer whispered something in her ear, and she nodded without looking at me. Mom sat in the gallery, back row, shoulders hunched, hands clutching a handkerchief, like it was the only thing tethering her to earth. Our eyes met just for a moment. Then she looked away. I moved to my seat. Torrin stood near the door, silent as a wall. Lila sat beside me, laptop open, her fingers flying across the keys like a pianist mid-concerto. Judge Mary Ann Holt entered. "All rise." I stood straighter than I had in years. "Let's begin," Judge Holt said, her voice clipped but even. "Ms. Vance," she gestured to Zara, "you've alleged that your sister, Elyra Vance, is mentally unfit to reclaim any legal stake in the Vance estate, correct?" Zara stood. "Correct, Your Honor. I have submitted sealed documentation regarding her military conduct and behavioral red flags. Her erratic re-entry into my life and our property has placed undue stress on our family, and I fear for my mother's safety." Every word was crafted to sound like concern, but her eyes gave it away, sharp, deliberate. This wasn't fear. It was a performance. Judge Holt turned to me. "Captain Vance, you may respond." I rose slowly, letting the silence stretch just enough to feel real. "My sister claims I'm unstable, that I pose a danger. But the only danger here," I said, sliding the recorder and a stack of documents across the table, "is what's being hidden." Lila stood and played the clip. Zara's voice filled the room. "If Elyra gets near the house again, eliminate her." Gasps rippled across the gallery. Zara's lawyer leapt to object, but Judge Holt held up a hand. "Continue," she said. The second voice came through. "Use her codes for the next deal." Judge Holt's jaw tightened. She leaned back slowly, eyes scanning the court file already sitting on her bench, one I hadn't seen before. A sealed manila folder with an unfamiliar crest on the seal. "What is that?" I asked, pointing. Judge Holt tapped it once. "A confidential file recently delivered regarding Captain Vance's military data access and potential exploitation via estate networks." My breath caught. So they'd gotten to the judge, or at least tried. Zara shifted in her seat, suddenly still. "May I review the contents, Your Honor?" Lila asked, stepping forward. "Not yet," Judge Holt said. "I need to verify the origin." I sat again, shoulders rigid. The room crackled with tension. Then Zara stood. "Your Honor, my sister has fabricated this entire audio. It's a deep fake, one of her skills from military intelligence. She's trying to take what was never hers." Judge Holt's eyes narrowed. "And what of the original will?" Zara blinked. Too long. "I'm unaware of any second version." That was a lie. I turned toward the gallery. "Grandpa told me before he died. He wrote me a letter. He said the real will was in a safety box under your jurisdiction." Judge Holt looked startled for the first time all morning. "A 2008 real estate trust," Lila added, holding up the scanned watermark. The judge reached for the red phone beside her bench. "I'll have that box retrieved." Then, just before she spoke another word, someone entered the courtroom from the side door. A tall man in a dark suit, thin gloves. I knew that silhouette. The gloved man from Torrin's photos. He whispered into the clerk's ear, handed her a card, then left as quickly as he came. Judge Holt accepted the card, scanned it, then turned pale. She passed it to her bailiff and stood. "Clear the room." Whispers exploded in every direction. "Clear it," she repeated, louder now. "Now!" The bailiff ushered people out as confusion turned into tension. I caught one last glimpse of Zara, her mask starting to crack. She looked at me like she wanted to say something, but didn't. 10 minutes later, only 6 of us remained. The judge, Lila, me, Zara, her lawyer, the bailiff. "I need to verify the origin of this new evidence," Judge Holt said. "Until then, no rulings, no contact. This courtroom is sealed." Her gavel struck once. Court adjourned. I didn't move. Neither did Zara. But we both knew, whatever was in that sealed file, would either exonerate me or destroy everything I had left. The next morning, the courthouse parking lot shimmered with heat. Even in the early hour, the blacktop radiated a quiet kind of pressure, one that made every step toward those marble doors feel heavier, like walking into the mouth of something that was finally ready to bite. I clutched the file in my hands, proof I'd spent weeks chasing, risking, bleeding for. It held everything: Grandpa's original will, the sealed letter, the audio recorder loaded with Zara's voice, the past and future compressed into one manila envelope. Torin walked beside me, his silence louder than any words. Lila followed behind, her eyes scanning every face, every shadow. We'd come as a unit. No more second-guessing, no more running. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Word had gotten out. Reporters in cheap suits filled the back benches, notepads ready. A local news camera blinked its red recording light from the gallery corner. Zara sat stiff at the plaintiff's table. Different suit, same smirk. But there was something beneath it now, something fraying. The judge entered. "All rise." We did. "Captain Vance," Judge Holt began, eyes locked on me, "you have requested this emergency session with new evidence?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said, stepping forward. With both hands, I placed the envelope on the bench. I didn't look at Zara. Didn't need to. Judge Holt opened the file and scanned its contents. She moved slowly, deliberately. Her eyes flicked from page to page, face unreadable. Then came the moment I'd waited for. "This is your grandfather's signature," she said, holding up the original will. "Witnessed, notarized, filed under private trust, and never revoked." Zara's lawyer shot to his feet. "Objection! This material wasn't part of pretrial discovery because it was hidden," Lila interjected, voice firm but clear, suppressed by someone who had administrative access. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Judge Holt held up a hand. "Enough!" She turned back to the recorder. "Let's hear it." Lila pressed play. Zara's voice filled the room again, sharper through the court sound system. "If Elyra gets near the house again, eliminate her." Gasps, a beat of silence, then the second voice. "Use her codes for the next deal." A reporter dropped his pen. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." But what made the blood drain from Zara's face wasn't the audio. It was Judge Holt's response. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "Lock the doors." The bailiff blinked. "Ma'am?" "Lock the doors," she repeated. "No one leaves this courtroom." Gasps again. Then the scrape of boots and cuffs. Two plainclothes officers stood from the gallery. One moved to the back exit. The other approached Zara. "Elyra Vance, you are under investigation for criminal conspiracy, fraud, and potential espionage involving federal defense materials." She stood abruptly, knocking over her chair. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Ma'am, place your hands behind your back." Her lawyer scrambled to shield her, but it was too late. Click. The cuffs snapped shut. Zara turned toward me as they led her past. Her eyes were glassy now, not with tears, but with rage, pure, exposed rage. "You think this ends with me?" she hissed. "You're not safe, Elyra. None of you are." I held her gaze. Let her see that I wasn't flinching. Let her see what real resolve looked like. Then they took her away. The room felt vacuumed of sound. Even the reporters froze, pens still hovering mid-sentence. Judge Holt leaned forward, eyes scanning the rest of us. "I will be issuing subpoenas and a federal referral. This court is now in recess, pending federal action." She stood and walked out. No gavel needed. Everyone remained frozen for a moment longer, until the room finally broke into noise. Lila exhaled beside me. That was intense. Torin placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "You did it." But it didn't feel like a win. Not yet. I looked across the room to where Mom sat, trembling in the corner, her purse clutched against her chest. When our eyes met, I thought she'd turn away again, but she didn't. She stood slowly and walked toward me, small steps, eyes wet but clear. "I didn't know," she whispered. "Not really. She said you were the threat." I know what she said. I didn't mean for it to sound cold, but it was the truth. She reached for my hand. I let her take it. Her grip was frail, fingers thin with time. "I was afraid," she said. "So was I replied. The moment held for just long enough to feel like something more than pain. Then the courtroom doors burst open again, this time with two more officers. And in the hallway beyond them, just before the crowd closed in, I saw him, the man from the photo, the gloved one, watching, then gone. And just like that, I knew. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. They led Zara out the back entrance of the courthouse in handcuffs, her heels scuffing against the tile. She didn't look back, not at me, not at Mom, not at anyone. Her jaw was clenched, her face pale, but her spine never bent. Even then, she still thought she was untouchable. I stood in the hallway, breath shallow, watching the doors swing shut behind her. Somewhere, a camera flash snapped. A woman near the elevator whispered Zara's name like it had just been added to a most wanted list. For a moment, I didn't feel anything. Not rage, not relief, just empty. Like every emotion had burned out on contact. Then I heard Mom cry. I turned. She was slumped on the bench, the handkerchief now crumpled in her lap, hands shaking. "I didn't know," she kept whispering. "I didn't know she could. She would." I walked over slowly, unsure of what to do with my hands. She looked up at me, and for the first time in years I saw her, not the fragile woman bent under Zara's shadow, but someone just trying to survive a life she didn't choose. "I should have protected you both," she said. "You tried," I answered, though I wasn't sure if it was true or just something she needed to hear. Her eyes searched mine. "Did she ever say why? Why she hated you so much?" I thought about it. The years of cold silence, of being left off family emails, of my name gradually vanishing from holiday invitations, estate plans, even photo albums. The way Zara always smiled too wide when I walked in the room. "She didn't hate me," I said finally. "She hated that Grandpa chose me." Mom flinched, like the truth physically hit her. "She always wanted his approval," I added. "And when he gave it to me, quietly, privately, it broke something in her, and she spent the rest of her life trying to undo it." A long silence passed between us. "I enabled her," Mom said, voice low. "Let her think it was okay to rewrite the truth." "You were scared." She nodded. "Still am." She reached for my hand again, and this time I let her hold it longer. The warmth between us was small, but real. It didn't fix anything, but it didn't need to, not yet. Outside, the courthouse lawn was packed with reporters and curious onlookers. Torrin and Lila waited at the edge of the sidewalk, both on high alert. I joined them, and the three of us slipped into the rental SUV without a word. Back at Torrin's, the war room was exactly as we'd left it, chaotic, cluttered, and humming with tension. But something was different now. A corner had been turned. "We'll get a call soon," Lila said. "Feds will want statements, depositions." "I'll give them everything," I said, "but I want to finish this." Torrin raised an eyebrow. "You think it's not finished?" I shook my head and dropped the surveillance photo on the table. The man from the courtroom, the one with the gloves, he was watching me again, just before Zara was taken out. Torrin studied the photo. "You sure it was him?" "I'd bet my discharge on it," Lila frowned. "That means Zara wasn't the end. She was the front." We all stood in silence, the pieces snapping into place, the crates, the fake deed, the sealed file Judge Holt never got to read aloud, and the voice from the recording, the one who gave the orders. Whoever he was still out there, and he knew I was watching. I walked to the window and pulled the blinds back. Outside, the street was quiet. Still, but my skin itched. My gut tightened. "They're not done," I said. "We may have cut off the head, but something bigger's moving underneath." Torrin turned toward the gear bag he kept by the wall. "Then we gear up. Stay ahead." Lila opened her laptop. "I'll start tracing the financial trail again. Zara had shell companies. Let's see where they all lead." But as I stood there, exhausted, hollow, wired with adrenaline, I felt the weight of something deeper. Zara had collapsed in front of the entire county, but that wasn't what haunted me. It was the image of her being let out, still proud, still believing she'd done what she had to do, that I was the villain, that everything she'd built, even through lies and fraud, was justified. And the worst part? Somewhere in me, a tiny part understood it. Not forgave it, just understood the hunger for approval that morphs into resentment when it's never fed. I closed my eyes. Grandpa's voice echoed again, quiet, distant. "This place is yours when I'm gone. Not just the house, the responsibility. The rot was deeper than Zara, and if I wanted real peace, I had to dig until the foundation was clean." A notification buzzed on my phone. A news alert. Federal authorities expand Vance investigation. Multiple properties tied to foreign shell corporations. I scrolled down and stopped. There, in the corner of a leaked surveillance still, was a familiar figure. Gloves. Standing beside a dark SUV outside a different courthouse, 3 states away. This wasn't over. This wasn't even close. The courtroom was quieter than usual. No reporters this time. No photographers with rapid-fire shutters. Just a small crowd of family members, legal aides, and one exhausted judge ready to put the gavel down for good. Zara sat in chains, her once perfect suit replaced with a drab prison jumpsuit. Her wrists were cuffed in front of her now, no longer hidden behind power poses and pearl bracelets. She didn't meet my eyes, not once during the hearing. I should have felt victorious. Instead, all I felt was cold. Judge Holt reviewed the final sentencing terms without fanfare. Her voice was steady, clipped, but not unkind. Elyra Vance for conspiracy to defraud, forgery of federal documents, and endangering national security. This court sentences you to 7 years in federal custody with no eligibility for early release. The words rang out across the chamber. I inhaled, slowly, let it settle. Zara didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She just sat there, like the weight of her own story had finally sunk in. Mom let out a small breath beside me, part relief, part grief. Her hands were clasped so tightly in her lap, I could see the pale crescent moons beneath each fingernail. Next to me, Torrin stood like a pillar, arms crossed, watching it all with the kind of silent judgment only a soldier-turned-friend could carry. The bailiff stepped forward to lead Zara away, but as she passed me, just inches away, she finally looked up and whispered, "They're still watching you." Her words landed like a splinter under my skin. Then she was gone. The door shut behind her with a soft but final click. It was over. At least, the part with her. Back outside, the air felt different, sharper, brighter, but not quite warm. I stood on the courthouse steps staring into the middle distance, watching people go about their lives like nothing had just shifted. Torrin handed me a keychain, the estate keys. "Judge signed the release this morning," he said. "It's officially yours now." I turned the key ring over in my palm, the weight of it strange after everything. "You earned this," he added. I nodded, but the gratitude didn't come with words, just a swell in my chest I wasn't ready to unpack. Lila met us in the parking lot. She wore her usual blazer, but her face was softer than usual. "You okay?" she asked. "Define okay," I muttered. She half smiled. "Fair." She opened her tablet and handed me a printed news brief. Federal probe expands into Blackwell Defense Network, shadow operative at large. No known name. Suspected of recruiting domestic assets via family trusts. Beneath the headline was a grainy photo of the gloved man, his face still a blur. Torrin looked over my shoulder. "You recognize anything?" "Just the posture," I said. "Same guy from the estate. Same guy outside the courtroom." Lila added, "Same guy tied to 2 other cases, both involving military veterans targeted through forged estate files." A pit formed in my stomach. Zara wasn't the mastermind. She was a pawn. Willing, manipulative, brutal, but a pawn nonetheless. I clenched the keys tighter. Later that evening, I returned to the estate alone. The driveway was overgrown, weeds poking through the gravel. The porch swing still creaked faintly in the breeze, like it had been waiting for someone to come home. I walked through each room in silence. The kitchen smelled of dust and lemon cleaner. The upstairs hallway still echoed faintly with the memories of 2 sisters running, laughing, slamming doors in childish wars that once felt like the end of the world. In Grandpa's study, I found the cigar box he used to keep under his desk drawer. Inside, a stack of faded letters and 1 Polaroid of me on his lap, grinning in a camouflage cap far too big for my head. I sat on the floor with it, back against the wall. I didn't cry, but I let myself feel it all. The betrayal, the justice, the ache for what could have been. And beneath all of that, a strange kind of peace. I had fought and won. Not because I was stronger, but because I didn't give up. Because I kept asking the hard questions, kept looking deeper, kept standing, even when the foundation felt cracked beneath my boots. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. I froze, listened. Nothing. Still, I stood, slow and deliberate, heart suddenly back in combat tempo. I stepped into the hall, eyes scanning. Nothing there. But when I looked down at the doormat near the front door, I saw it. A plain envelope. No address, no return name. Just my first name written in sharp black ink. Elyra. I crouched and picked it up, breath held. Inside, one slip of paper. 6 words. One more door left to open. No signature, no explanation. The Veterans Memorial in Pittsburgh stood quiet that morning. No speeches, no flags waving, just the soft rustle of wind through the stone columns. I traced my fingers over the black granite wall, stopping when they met the name carved beside my grandfather's. Vance, Harold J. And now, Vance, Elyra C. There it was, side by side, blood and legacy, bonded not by fortune but by choice. I hadn't expected to feel anything, but as my hand rested on that cool surface, something let go inside me. I wasn't invisible anymore. A soft click of heels behind me. I turned to find Mom standing a few paces back. She looked smaller somehow, coat too big for her shoulders, eyes red-rimmed but focused. She held out a letter. Pale blue envelope, slightly crumpled. "They cleared Zara's effects," she said. "This was tucked in her legal file. It's addressed to you." I hesitated, then took it. The paper was thin, her handwriting still sharp. "Elyra, you were always the better one. You just didn't know it. I wanted the world to see me. You wanted to serve it. I thought that made you weak. But I see it now. It made you whole. I lost the war I started. I hope someday that means something to you." Z. No apology. But maybe the closest she'd ever come. I folded the letter and slipped it into my coat. "I'm sorry she dragged you into all this," I said. Mom's voice cracked. "She dragged all of us." We stood in silence together, a mother and a daughter, the survivor and the witness. Later that afternoon, I returned to the estate one last time. The locks had been changed. The front door creaked with age and memory. Sunlight filtered through the parlor windows, dancing on the dust motes like tiny ghosts refusing to leave. I walked through each room slowly. Grandpa's study still smelled faintly of cedar and ink. I ran my fingers across his desk. Underneath the blotter pad was a note I hadn't seen before, one last piece of him. "Legacy isn't what you leave. It's who you leave standing." I stepped outside onto the porch. Torrin leaned against the railing, sipping black coffee from a chipped mug. No questions. Just a nod. "She's gone," I said. "Not all the way," he replied. "Feds are tracing her backers. Could take months," I nodded. "But my part's done." "You sure?" I looked out over the hills. The same trees we used to run through as kids, the same dirt that now carried a different weight. "I'm sure." Torrin reached into his coat and handed me one final envelope. This one was official, DOJ seal, stamped and dated. "Clearance restored," he said. "Your record's clean, and the military just classified you as a protected intelligence witness." I held the envelope tight like it might vanish. "You did what most people wouldn't," he added. "You stood your ground against your own blood." I smiled, tired but whole. That's the thing about blood. Sometimes you have to stop it to heal. We sat on the steps until the sun dipped behind the trees. The estate was mine now, legally. But more than that, it felt earned. Not because of what Grandpa promised, but because I chose not to become what Zara did. I chose the truth. And even when it nearly broke me, I kept choosing it. The lesson? It's simple. Strength isn't the absence of scars. It's learning how to carry them with grace and still fight for what's right. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If you found meaning in my story, please subscribe, like, comment, and share with someone who's faced their own kind of betrayal. And if you want more stories like this, of truth, family, and the fights that shape us, watch the next video. I'll be there, telling it like it happened.